My husband's family treated me like an outsider for 5 years, and when I finally stood up for myself at Thanksgiving, they tried to turn him against me, so I did this. And now they're begging to see their only grandchild throwaway because my sister-in-law is on Reddit and she would totally know this was about them. I, female, 32, have been married to my husband, Jacob, male, 35, for 5 years, and we have an 8-month-old daughter, Sally. This is about my mother-in-law, Patricia, female, 60, and I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting or if I need to take more drastic steps about her behavior. I met Jacob 6 years ago at a fundraiser for the elementary school where I teach kindergarten. We clicked immediately. I come from a middle-class family. My mom's a nurse. Dad worked for USPS for 30 years, while Jacob's family owns a successful regional construction company and is rich. Not that I care about that stuff. I fell in love with Jacob, not his money. His mother Patricia seemed polite when we first met, but there were signs I missed. She would make comments about my modest upbringing or ask if I was comfortable at fancy restaurants. One time she literally asked if I knew which fork to use first. I know basic table manners. I overheard her at our engagement party saying Jacob always had a thing for fixing strays, but hoped he'd get it out of his system. When I told Jacob later, he said I must have misheard or she was talking about something else. She definitely wasn't. I was already in love with Jacob and thought eventually she'd warm up to me. She didn't. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Every choice I made, Patricia had an opinion about. But the Wilsons have always had roses at their weddings, or that's a rather budget-conscious option, isn't it? She'd dismiss my ideas as quaint while pushing for what she wanted. Jacob mostly stayed out of it because it's easier not to get in the middle. I compromised on so many things just to keep the peace. For the past 5 years, she's consistently treated me like an outsider. Examples. She rearranges my table settings before dinner parties at our house. She and Stacy, Jacob's sister, female 38, switch to speaking French when I enter the room. I don't speak French. If I bring a dish to family gatherings, she'll fix it before serving. During family photos, she'll say stuff like, "Let's get one with just family first," and I'm supposed to step aside. She forgets to include me in family email chains about plans. She calls Jacob directly about everything instead of me. She always introduces me as Jacob's wife, never by my name. Jacob notices sometimes, but usually says that's just mom being mom, or she treated Stacy's ex-husband the same way until they had been married for like 10 years. Great, so I only have 5 more years of this. But also that ex-husband eventually left Stacy, so not exactly reassuring. Last Christmas, she gave Stacy this beautiful family necklace that had belonged to Jacob's grandmother, while I got bath products from the mall. Not even fancy bath products, the kind you get in those gift sets that were probably on sale. It hurt. Jacob got me a lovely gift, so it's not like I was sitting there with nothing, but it was just so obvious. Everything changed when we announced my pregnancy last year. Patricia suddenly started showing interest in my life, calling me regularly, asking about doctor appointments. I thought she was finally accepting me, but no, she was just excited about the baby. We struggled with fertility issues for over a year before getting pregnant, which made everything with the baby even more emotional for me. Not that Patricia ever asked about how I was feeling during those treatments. She just kept asking when we were going to give her a grandchild. Sally was born 8 months ago, and she's the first grandchild in the Wilson family. Patricia started overstepping every boundary we try to set. She shows up at our house unannounced to help. She rearranged the nursery I had spent months preparing. She questions every parenting choice I make, how I feed Sally, how I dress her, how I hold her. One time, she actually took Sally out of my arms because she said I wasn't supporting her head properly. Sally was 5 months old at that point and could hold her own head up just fine. Jacob tries to mediate, but basically just wants everyone to get along. He doesn't understand how exhausting it is dealing with his mother's constant criticism while also trying to keep a tiny human alive. So anyway, Thanksgiving. We agreed to have it at Chuck, Jacob's dad, male 63, and Patricia's house because she insisted on hosting her granddaughter's first Thanksgiving. I was nervous about it, but Jacob promised it would be fine. We get there Wednesday night to stay over. I had just put Sally down for a nap in the guest room and went to get some water. When I came back, I noticed Sally's diaper changing stuff was gone. I found it all set up in Patricia's master bathroom. I asked Patricia why she moved Sally's things. She told me the master bath had better lighting and more space, and it was safer for the baby. I explained that I'd prefer to keep Sally's things in our room where we're staying. She dismissed me and said she'd raised 2 children and knew better. She always calls me dear in this condescending tone. I started gathering some items to move back when Patricia called Jacob over. She told him I seemed anxious and didn't trust family. Jacob asked me if I could just leave things as they were to avoid making a scene. I reluctantly agreed. Patricia smiled at me and patted my arm like I was a child. During dinner, Patricia announced she had already enrolled Sally in some exclusive preschool starting at age 3 and had set up a trust fund with conditions that she would oversee. This was shocking because Jacob and I had been researching different education options, and we hadn't agreed to any of this. When I mentioned this, Patricia laughed and told me that Wilsons attend St. Margaret's, making it clear my background wasn't good enough. Then when I tried to feed Sally some pureed sweet potatoes I had made, Patricia took the spoon from my hand and said I was doing it wrong and the baby would choke. The portions were tiny. After an hour of her constantly correcting me and talking over me, I finally had enough. I told Patricia that while I appreciated her input, Jacob and I make the decisions about Sally's care and future. She got teary-eyed and left the table. Chuck and Stacy glared at me like I'd done something terrible. They pulled Jacob aside into Chuck's study. When Jacob came back 20 minutes later, he suggested I might be overreacting due to postpartum hormones and asked if I needed to speak to his mother that way. I couldn't believe it. I honestly felt like I was taking crazy pills. I gathered Sally and our things and told Jacob I was going home. He said he would smooth things over with his family and come home later. After midnight, Jacob finally came home and suggested I could try harder with his family. I've been trying for 6 years and I'm exhausted. I don't want Sally growing up thinking it's normal to be treated the way Patricia treats me, but I also don't want to cause problems between Jacob and his parents. I just don't know what to do anymore. Am I overreacting here? Or do I need to do something more drastic? Jacob keeps saying family is complicated, but I feel like I'm at my breaking point. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, Jacob is generally a good husband and father. This is our biggest issue. 2. No, I haven't directly confronted Patricia about all of this before. I've always tried to keep the peace. 3. Patricia has never apologized for anything ever, as far as I know. 4. Jacob's dad, Chuck, is nice but passive. He never contradicts Patricia. 5. Some people asked about the trust fund. I have no idea what conditions Patricia was talking about, but that's definitely something we need to discuss. 6. For those suggesting divorce, that's not on the table right now. I love Jacob, and this is really our only major issue, but I do think we need to have a serious conversation about boundaries with his family. 7. No, I don't think Patricia would ever hurt Sally deliberately. She's controlling but not dangerous. 8. Yes, we've discussed couples counseling before, but haven't gone yet. Maybe it's time. Edit 2. A lot of people are saying this is the hill to die on, and honestly, you might be right. I think I need to have a serious talk with Jacob about what happens next. I can't keep living like this. Now, for the first update. Wow. First of all, thank you so much for all the comments and support on my last post. I honestly wasn't expecting that level of response. Rip my inbox, lol. Reading through everyone's comments really helped me realize I wasn't crazy or overreacting about Patricia's behavior. So a lot has happened since Thanksgiving. After we got home that night and Jacob finally came home after midnight, he spent hours smoothing things over with his family. I barely slept. I was just laying there, getting more and more angry, thinking about everything. The next morning, after we got Sally fed and down for her morning nap, I told Jacob we needed to talk, like really talk. I asked him straight up why he didn't defend me at Thanksgiving dinner when his mom literally took a spoon out of my hand and accused me of not knowing how to feed our own daughter. He gave me the same old, "Mom was just trying to help," and "you're being too sensitive about it" lines that I've heard a million times before. I was so done with that excuse. I went to our bedroom and pulled out this journal I've been keeping for literally the past 5 years, documenting all the little and big things Patricia has done. I know that sounds weird, maybe, but after the first year I started writing stuff down because Jacob would always say I was exaggerating or misremembering things. The look on his face when he saw how thick this journal was, he seemed genuinely shocked. I flipped through and pointed out patterns, all the time she excluded me from family things, undermined me, talked over me, criticized me, etc., and how he consistently dismissed or downplayed it. He got all defensive, saying, "She just has high expectations, and she does that to everyone." So I asked him if he would let anyone else treat me the way his mother does. Like if my boss or one of our friends treated me that way, would he be okay with it? He got quiet for a minute and then said, "Family relationships are complicated, and different rules apply." That's when I lost it a little bit. I told him I refused to let Sally grow up thinking it's normal or acceptable for someone to treat her mother this way. That's not the example I want to set for our daughter about what healthy relationships look like. He accused me of threatening to keep Sally from his family, but that's not what I meant at all. I just want some basic boundaries and respect. Is that really too much to ask? After going back and forth for like an hour, he finally admitted that his mom can be difficult sometimes, but then he hit me with the classic, "That's just how she is" line. Like that makes it okay. I was so frustrated and upset, I told him I needed some space to think. I packed up some stuff for me and Sally and went to my mom's place. My mom lives in this tiny 2-bedroom apartment across town, and she had to convert her craft room back into a bedroom for me to stay there. I felt kind of bad about that, but she was so supportive. Jacob was pissed when I left. He kept texting me saying I was running away from problems instead of working through them like adults. At first, I thought he was just choosing his family over me again, but I realize now he was actually scared about losing access to Sally. But I needed the space to clear my head and figure out what to do. For 3 days, we barely talked beyond logistics about Sally. Then on the 4th day, Jacob showed up at my mom's door with flowers and tears in his eyes. My mom went out to run errands to give us privacy, lol. Apparently, he'd been talking to his college roommate, Mike, whose wife also had issues with Patricia's behavior. Mike helped Jacob see the patterns that he'd been blind to. I mean, I don't want Jacob to have to choose between me and his family. Okay, that's not entirely true. In my darkest moments, I totally wanted him to choose me over them. But I was definitely at the point where something had to change, or our marriage wasn't going to survive. So together we came up with a plan. 1. We would temporarily limit Patricia and Chuck's access to Sally until clear boundaries were established and respected. 2. Jacob would be the primary communicator with his family about these boundaries. No more throwing me under the bus. 3. We would require family counseling as a condition for regular access to Sally. 4. We would implement immediate consequences for boundary violations, like leaving events or restricting visits. When Patricia realized we weren't coming back right away, she went ballistic. She started calling and texting both of us nonstop. She sent me these long messages calling me unstable and manipulative and saying I was using Sally as a weapon against the family. She even told Jacob I was poisoning him against his own mother and that he needed to man up and take control of his household. I wish I was making this up. Jacob finally took over all communications, like we agreed, and told them we needed space and would contact them when we were ready to discuss things. He was actually really firm about it, which honestly was kind of hot lol. Oh, I forgot to mention, Patricia actually showed up unannounced at our house while we were still at my mom's. When she found it empty, she called Jacob crying hysterically, saying I had kidnapped her granddaughter and they should call the police. Jacob had to talk her down and remind her that I'm Sally's mother and it's literally impossible for me to kidnap my own child. What the frick? During this time, Jacob told me something that really helped him understand. His friend Dave dated a girl in high school that Patricia hated. Patricia would criticize everything about her. Dave broke up with her, and Patricia always said it was because she wasn't good enough for Dave. But Jacob recently reconnected with Dave, who told him they actually broke up because his girlfriend couldn't stand how Patricia treated her, and Dave never stood up for her. Jacob realized he was doing the same thing to me. After about 2 weeks of limited contact, we decided it was time to meet with Patricia and Chuck. We arranged to meet at this restaurant that has private rooms. Jacob's idea, they'd be less likely to make a scene in public. We only invited Patricia and Chuck, but Stacy showed up too, clearly there to support her parents. Jacob started by calmly explaining that the current family dynamic was unhealthy and needed to change. Patricia immediately interrupted him, saying I had poisoned him against his family. I stayed quiet and let Jacob handle it like we agreed. Jacob was amazing. He firmly stated that the disrespect toward me has been ongoing for years and he's been wrong to ignore it. Chuck tried to minimize everything, calling them misunderstandings, but Jacob wasn't having it. Then Jacob presented our list of boundaries regarding Sally and our relationship. Things like no dropping by without calling first, no undermining our parenting decisions, no criticism of me or my background, respect for our rules regarding Sally, agreement to attend family counseling. Stacy literally laughed and called them demands and said we were being controlling. Patricia started crying, of course, and saying we were trying to keep her from her only grandchild. Jacob made it clear these weren't negotiations, they were requirements for having a relationship with us and Sally. Chuck asked for time to think about all this, which seemed reasonable. But then Patricia accused me of orchestrating everything to isolate Jacob from his family. That's when Jacob told them he's actually been seeing his own therapist to discuss his family dynamics. Patricia looked really shocked. She said, "You're discussing family matters with strangers," like it was the ultimate betrayal. At that point, it was clear we weren't getting anywhere, so we got up to leave. As we were walking out, Patricia called after us, saying I would regret trying to come between a mother and her son, and that this isn't over. It was really weird, I swear. Over the next few days, they tried everything to get around our boundaries. They sent these insanely expensive gifts for Sally, which we returned. They tried contacting Jacob's colleagues to check if he was okay. So inappropriate. They even had extended family members call us expressing concern about the situation. It was a full-on manipulation campaign. Then, about 3 weeks after our confrontation, Patricia sent this email that actually seemed different. She acknowledged she may have been overeager in her grandmother role, understatement of the century, and offered to start fresh. She said she and Chuck would be willing to try counseling if that's what it would take to see Sally. I'm skeptical, but also hopeful. I mean, I never wanted to keep Sally from her grandparents completely. I just want to be treated with basic respect. We agreed to meet again with the condition that they would attend counseling with us. The first session is scheduled for next week. I'm honestly nervous about it. Has anyone been through family counseling with in-laws before? Any advice on how to approach it productively? I don't want it to just turn into another opportunity for Patricia to twist everything around. Edit. A lot of people are asking if Jacob is still in contact with Mike and his wife. Yes, we actually had dinner with them last weekend. They moved back to the area a few months ago. They were so supportive and gave us some really good advice about setting boundaries. Mike's wife told me it took them nearly divorcing before she got Mike to understand how toxic Patricia's behavior was. Edit 2. To clarify for those asking, we're not permanently keeping Sally from her grandparents. The temporary limitation was just to make it clear we were serious about the boundaries. And yes, there are definitely some visits happening with strict supervision. We're not monsters. Edit 3. For everyone suggesting I show the therapist my journal, great idea. I hadn't thought of that, but it would help establish the pattern of behavior without having to remember every incident on the spot. Edit 4. Someone asked if Patricia has ever apologized directly to me. No, not once in 6 years. The email was addressed to both Jacob and me, but she still hasn't acknowledged any specific things she's done wrong or apologized to me personally. Now for the second update. So it's been almost 4 months since my last update. Wow, time flies with a baby. Oh my freaking God. First, thank you so much to everyone who commented with support on my previous posts. Reading all your comments honestly helped me feel like I wasn't completely losing my mind dealing with Patricia. So, the first therapy session, I was so nervous that morning that I almost canceled. Sally had been up literally all night with teething pain. Those molars are brutal, and I was completely exhausted and emotional. My mom came over to watch Sally so we could go without distractions, which was honestly a lifesaver because I was already on edge. Jacob and I got there like 20 minutes early to briefly talk with the therapist, Dr. Matthews, about our goals. We basically explained the whole situation and that we were hoping for some acknowledgement and change from Patricia so we could all have a healthier relationship moving forward. I was honestly shaking the entire time we were waiting in the lobby. Patricia and Chuck arrived exactly on time, literally to the minute. both looking super uncomfortable and weirdly formal. Like Patricia was wearing this fancy blazer thing, as if she was going to a business meeting instead of therapy. Chuck just looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. Oh, and Stacy, Jacob's sister, refused to come, telling her parents she didn't need therapy to fix someone else's problems, which, whatever, not surprising. So the session started with Dr. Matthews establishing some ground rules about respect and listening without interrupting. Patricia immediately questioned why therapy was even necessary, saying family issues should be handled privately. Ironic considering how public she's made her criticism of me over the years, but okay. Dr. Matthews asked each person to share their perspective without interruption. Jacob went first, and oh my freaking God, I was so proud of him. He described his realization about the pattern of disrespect toward me and how he had failed to address it for years. Chuck looked super uncomfortable during this part, but stayed quiet. Patricia tried to interrupt Jacob like 3 different times until Dr. Matthews firmly redirected her. When it was my turn, I shared specific examples of feeling excluded and undermined over the years. I brought my journal, but didn't need to reference it much, because honestly, these incidents are burned into my brain at this point. Patricia kept making these little huffing noises the whole time I was talking, which was really distracting and annoying. When Patricia finally got her turn, she claimed I was too sensitive and misinterpreted family traditions. What tradition involves excluding your son's wife from family photos? I'd love to know. Dr. Matthews asked Patricia how she would feel if she was treated the same way, and Patricia got super defensive, saying her own mother-in-law was much worse to her and she survived just fine, so I should basically just suck it up. Then the most unexpected thing happened. Chuck, who has basically never contradicted Patricia in the 6 years I've known him, actually spoke up and admitted he's noticed Patricia can be controlling sometimes. Patricia looked shocked and betrayed. She actually teared up. Dr. Matthews tried to guide the conversation toward understanding how these dynamics affect Sally, but Patricia kept insisting everything she's done has been for the good of the family, and that she was just trying to maintain standards, whatever that means. The session ended with homework. Each person had to write what healthy family relationships look like to them. Patricia seemed really annoyed by this assignment, saying she didn't need to do homework at her age, but Dr. Matthews held firm. The session was emotionally draining, but also revealing, especially Chuck's comment. Patricia refused to schedule another appointment right away, saying she needed time to process everything, which I figured meant find ways to twist this around and blame everything on Emily. We maintained our boundaries during this time. Patricia kept trying to see Sally without Jacob present, which we declined. She also sent this ridiculously expensive baby playset without asking if we even had room for it. We don't, or if it was age appropriate, it wasn't. We returned it with a note explaining that any gifts needed to be discussed with us first. She was not happy about that, lol. About 2 weeks after the session, Chuck surprisingly reached out to Jacob alone, asking to meet for lunch. I was honestly suspicious at first, thinking it was some kind of trap or that Patricia had put him up to it. But Jacob said his dad seemed genuinely remorseful when they met. Chuck admitted he had enabled Patricia's controlling behavior throughout their marriage because it was easier than confronting her than dealing with the fallout of standing up to her. Jacob said his dad even opened up about his own childhood, which is something Chuck never talks about. Apparently, Chuck's mother had been similarly controlling, and Chuck had sworn not to be domineering like his father had been, but in avoiding that pattern, he had become totally passive instead. It was kind of sad, actually. Jacob said his dad teared up at one point, talking about how he didn't want Sally to grow up in a toxic environment like he did, so Chuck became this unexpected ally, gradually working with Patricia at home while encouraging her to attend more therapy sessions. I never thought I'd say this, but Chuck really stepped up. He started calling Jacob regularly to check in and would actually listen rather than just defending Patricia like he always did before. We eventually agreed to a second therapy session, which went somewhat better, though Patricia still struggled to accept responsibility for her actions. I initially thought Patricia's tears during therapy were genuine remorse, but later realized they were more about feeling attacked than true understanding. Dr. Matthews actually pointed this out to me privately. She said tears can sometimes be a trick, which I had never really thought about before. Things got worse when Sally's first birthday approached last month. We had planned a small celebration at our home with just close friends and my family. Nothing fancy, just cake and presents for a 1-year-old who wouldn't even remember it anyway. Well, Patricia called Jacob, insisting we have a proper celebration at the Wilson home instead, complete with professional photographer and custom cake from this super expensive bakery they use for all Wilson family celebrations. She had already started making arrangements without even asking us, like she had called the bakery and everything. Jacob held firm, I was so proud, and explained we had already made plans, but they were welcome to attend if they could respect our boundaries. Patricia lost it, demanding to know why we were excluding family from this milestone. Jacob stayed super calm and reiterated they were invited but had to respect our decisions as Sally's parents. Patricia accused me of turning Sally's birthday into a power play, even though this was Jacob talking to her, not me, but somehow everything is always my fault. Jacob explained this wasn't about power, but about respecting us as parents. Then Patricia threatened not to come if she had to be so careful around us. Jacob's response was perfect. He told her it wasn't about being careful, it was about basic respect. I seriously could have kissed him right there. Patricia said she'd discuss with Chuck and get back to us. Jacob ended the call after saying the invitation stood if they could behave appropriately. About an hour later, Patricia texted that they'd be there, but we shouldn't expect much enthusiasm. Jacob didn't even respond to that passive-aggressive BS. But then something unexpected happened. The day before Sally's birthday party, Patricia called Jacob in tears. He put the call on speaker so I could hear. We've been trying to stay totally transparent with each other through this whole thing. Patricia actually admitted she was terrified of losing her relationship with her only grandchild, and that Chuck had helped her realize her behavior was pushing us away. She asked if they could come early to the party to talk, and we agreed. So the next day, they arrived about an hour before anyone else. Patricia looked different, like subdued, less perfect. Chuck was right beside her, being super supportive. I offered them drinks, just to be polite, and Patricia actually thanked me genuinely without making some comment about how I made the coffee wrong or whatever. Then Patricia did something I never thought I'd see. She admitted she's been controlling and disrespectful toward me. I just listened silently, honestly not sure if this was another manipulation tactic. She confessed she felt threatened by my different background and parenting ideas, which was oddly validating to hear after all this time. Chuck gently encouraged Patricia when she struggled to continue. She actually started crying, like real tears, not the manipulative kind, and acknowledged her behavior could cause her to lose Sally, which was her greatest fear. I finally asked the question I've wanted to ask for 5 years. Why has she treated me as an outsider for so long? Patricia revealed her own mother-in-law had excluded her for years, criticizing everything from her clothes to her parenting, and she had unconsciously repeated the pattern. She said she thought she was being a better mother-in-law because she wasn't as outwardly mean, but she realized she was doing the same things in more subtle ways. I shared how deeply the exclusion hurt me over the years. The family photos I was asked to step out of, the conversations in French I couldn't understand, the constant corrections and criticisms. I felt myself getting emotional, but tried to keep it together. Patricia asked if we could start over, continuing with regular family therapy. Jacob expressed hope, but made it clear our boundaries weren't going anywhere. Patricia nodded, saying she understood it would take time to rebuild trust. Then I did something I hadn't done voluntarily in months. I suggested Patricia hold Sally. The look on her face, she accepted with visible emotion. And for the first time, she handled Sally exactly as I showed her, without making any comments about how I was doing it wrong. The birthday party itself went surprisingly well. Patricia deferred to me on all matters regarding Sally and even complimented the simple cake I had baked myself, instead of commenting on how it wasn't professionally decorated or whatever. Over the following 2 months, we've continued with family therapy sessions, and Patricia has been showing what seem like genuine efforts to change. She asks permission before buying things for Sally, checks before giving advice, and makes a point to include me in conversations instead of just talking to Jacob. We've gradually increased Patricia and Chuck's access to Sally, starting with short visits where both Jacob and I were present, then progressing to Patricia and Chuck taking Sally to the park for an hour while I ran errands. NGL, I was checking my phone constantly that first time, but everything was fine. There have definitely been setbacks, like when Patricia slipped and made a comment about my simple approach to Sally's wardrobe. But the difference is that she caught herself and apologized immediately without being prompted. The old Patricia would have doubled down or acted like I was overreacting. So where are we now? Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's significantly improved. Patricia and Chuck see Sally once a week, always respecting our parenting decisions and asking before making any suggestions. I never wanted to keep Sally from her grandparents completely, even though there were definitely times I fantasized about moving across the country, lol. But the strict boundaries were necessary to force real change. Standing firm ultimately saved our family relationships rather than destroying them. Jacob's relationship with his parents has actually improved as he's learned to be more assertive. Chuck and Patricia seem to have a healthier dynamic too, with Chuck being more involved in conversations instead of just deferring to Patricia on everything. I don't think Patricia and I will ever be best friends or anything, but we've developed a mutual respect that makes family gatherings tolerable and sometimes even pleasant. Sally is benefiting from having grandparents who now understand their role as supportive rather than controlling. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice and support through this journey. While there are still occasional tough moments, the family dynamic has fundamentally changed for the better, giving Sally the chance to have healthy relationships with all her family members. Edit. Wow, this blew up again. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, Jacob and I are doing great. This whole experience actually brought us closer together as we learned to be a united front. 2. For those asking about Stacy, she's still pretty cold toward me, but at least she's not actively undermining me anymore. Baby steps, I guess. 3. Yes, I did show the therapist my journal in a private session, and it was incredibly helpful for establishing patterns without getting bogged down in she said disputes. Several people suggested this in my last post, and it was seriously good advice. Number 4. For everyone asking if I trust Patricia's change, I'm hopeful but not naive. Trust takes time to rebuild. We're taking it day by day. 5. No, Patricia still hasn't directly apologized for specific incidents from the past, but she has acknowledged the overall pattern of behavior, which is honestly more than I expected. 6. We're still in family therapy, now monthly instead of weekly, and plan to continue for the foreseeable future. 7. Yes, Chuck and Jacob have developed a much stronger relationship through all this. It's actually been beautiful to watch. 8. For those who said I should just cut them off completely, I get where you're coming from, but I always wanted Sally to have grandparents in her life if possible. I just needed them to respect me as her mother first. Edit 2. Someone asked what happened with the trust fund Patricia tried to set up for Sally. We had a separate conversation about that with a financial advisor present. The conditions were basically that Sally would only get the money if she attended certain schools and followed a Wilson family-approved career path. We declined and asked that any financial gifts be put in the 529 account we set up instead. After some back and forth, they agreed.